last week we spoke to Elisa Choy. She's a data analyst at a company called Maven Data, and she uses the internet to work out what's going on and looks at the types of language that people are using on the internet. And 3 years ago, she correctly predicted that Scott Morrison would beat Bill Shorten, or that the Liberals would beat Labor, when the opinion poll said the opposite thing. She's back with us now. She's been doing some more work the past week or so. Elisa Choy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Well, last week you said you still had some more work to do. You suspected that the most likely outcome was possibly a hung parliament with Labor governing with the independents. What have you learnt this week?
So we've been furiously revising the data and analysing over the last 48 hours, and what we have to say is that it's still looking like a Labor government with the minority government with support from the Greens and Independents, or a slim majority.
Right, so and not really much of a chance for the coalition to retain power?
Highly unlikely.
Right. What about the United Australia Party? You said that they were maybe a force to be reckoned with. Do you see their vote still heading north?
I still see that the United Australia Party is cutting through and has influence in this election. However, what's coming very clearly is as we go seat by seat, there are no seats, obviously, that they're going to hold. In fact, I'm thinking Craig Kelly's seat might be at risk and Hughes anyway. So their impact will actually be through the preferences.
Through preferences.
Correct.
Okay, now what about independents? We just spoke to a volunteer for Zoe Daniels' campaign in Goldstein, and we know that the so-called teal independents are very active in seats like Kooyong and so forth. Do you see any or many of the independents winning?
Yes, I'm actually seeing that quite a number of seats are tipping towards the independents, up to 13 seats to swing to independents across the country, and most of these seats are going to be coming out of the Liberal National Coalition.
Right, so the Liberals and Nationals lose seats, they lose them to the independents, and depending on how many seats Labor wins, Labor might have to govern with the permission or with the power sharing of a couple of the independents.
That's right. I'm starting to see that we're going to be expecting a very different government come 24 hours in time.
It's going to be difficult, though, because Anthony Albanese and other Labor members, like Richard Marles, who's the deputy leader, I've spoken with him, I mean, they're on record a number of times as saying they will not do any sort of deal with the independents. So if they do have to do one, won't that sort of go down rather badly with those of us who believe that truth in politics is a good idea?
Well, this all goes to how politics is run. There are so many rules of the game, and I think one clear thing that's come out of this election is that our understanding of how elections are run and where preferences and voting goes is still quite low in this country. So I myself had to do some reading up to understand how the games of politics works. So I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a good point.
What are the main reasons you see that the Liberals might lose, up to 15 or so seats, maybe even more? Is it the alleged problem that women have with Scott Morrison? Is it the focus on climate change? What does your data tell you?
It's a number of factors, and it goes to, I think, three key things. Number one, it's always about the issues that matter to people, and issues that have not been addressed to the dissatisfaction of the population in Australia has been around climate change, and also the second one being corruption and integrity in politics. So those two. However, there's a third one, which is the discontent towards how the government, and particularly Mr Morrison, has handled or mishandled issues around women. Right.
Okay. Because that's an interesting one, because he's the last few days he's been getting his wife Jenny out on the campaign trail, and maybe that's an attempt to try and diffuse that issue. So I guess there's nothing that could really change in the next 24 hours to shift your prediction, is there?
Well, certain seats are on a knife's edge, so they can change. But I think we've had about 7 million votes cast already. So a lot of people checked out, which is a record number. And so I think that given there was a great theme around disillusionment that we were seeing early in the campaign towards the two major parties, it's no surprise that a lot of people have checked out and decided they've seen enough, which is actually going to be, I think, a signal that people are compelled to do things if they feel very strongly. And so given that many votes, I think it's a sign that people are keen to vote this current government out.
All right, thank you, Elisa. Really appreciate your input. Elisa Choy there, who's a data analyst and an economist with Maven Data. So what she's saying is, I've got her press release here. The Liberal National Coalition government could lose a total of 19 seats. They're predicting anywhere between 13 and 17 new independents coming in. So look out. we might get used to seeing Monique Ryan and or Zoe Daniels from Goldstein in the federal parliament, that Labor, if it's lucky, might just get a majority or might have to do a deal with at least a couple of the independents. And that the reason that people are turning away from the government are climate change, corruption, because the government has said it doesn't want to set up an anti-corruption body at the federal level, and Scott Morrison's alleged trouble with women, or the women have a problem with Scott Morrison. Interesting. 133 693. For me, the big issue is my forecast for tomorrow is a minority Labor government. I think Labor will win like 74, 75 seats, and that's not quite enough. They'll need really two more to be sure of getting their votes through, because they've got to appoint a speaker. Now, the problem I have here is that Anthony Albanese and Richard Marles, both on record on this station, as saying that they will not do a deal with the independents. And if tomorrow night they can't get a majority and they have to do a deal, it's going to be like what it was like for Julia Gillard back in 2010. She said there will be no carbon tax. Suddenly there was a carbon tax, and that blighted her prime ministership for the next 2.5 years. Anyway, we will see, but it is also possible Labor gets a small majority. 133 693. The calls continue in a moment. We'll also have the share market.